You're learning to unmask your ADHD and or autism, and not only are you going through a skill regression where you don't even know how to perform day-to-day tasks the way that you used to without just masking and just going against your needs, preferences, wants, and values, but you're also lacking motivation, and you also have no idea what you like or want anymore anyway, because all of your motivation and the things that you wanted just seem like they came from society expectations, partners' expectations, family expectations, or what you think that you should be doing, not necessarily what you wanted to do. And now you feel kind of lost and a little bit stuck and overwhelmed at all that because you're like, well, how do I even start living my life? Makes sense. Here's some tips to help that be a little bit less overwhelming and scary. Number 1, acceptance. It's important to recognize that you have ADHD and or autism. Number 2, once you realize that you have ADHD and or autism, or you might have it, it might be a good idea to start researching the signs, the symptoms, the ways that that might be manifesting in your own life, and then go about researching the ways that people have learned how to manage those signs and symptoms, and then put your own little flair and twist on it. And I should insert here that this should be a slow and steady process. You are a human, you got to make room for error, as well as just understanding that you are ever evolving and your needs and wants and preferences and things like that are going to change and evolve over time. And the ways that you go about addressing those things should change over time as well, according to where you're at in that particular moment in your life. So start figuring out how your ADHD and or autism is showing up in your life. Then from there, start slowly but surely figuring out your own needs, wants, preferences, and values. If you don't know what your needs, wants, preferences, and values are, you can be inspired by other people's stories and slowly but surely get curious about yourself in your day-to-day. Like, oh, do I like this sensory thing? Do I like bright lights? Do I like certain colors, textures? Are there things that would make my life a little bit more easy? Write those things down, or at least put it in a notes app. Start working on breaking down your internalized ableism. The goal isn't to try to be neurotypical. The goal is to try to figure out your wants, your needs, the ways that ADHD and or autism are showing up in your life, and figuring out how to fulfill those needs for yourself in a way that feels authentic, while also slowly but surely adjusting to how your needs and values and everything might change over time. Not getting rid of ADHD and or autism. That's not going to happen, and that's okay. Also, getting curious about how you can start appreciating these aspects about yourself. And you might have resistance to the fact that I said maybe you can learn how to appreciate your ADHD and autism. For example, I think that my neurodivergence helps me think a little bit outside of the box. I think when I'm not being an ableist towards myself, I'm a lot more creative. I'm a lot more goofy, silly, and I honestly love a low light aesthetic. Also, acknowledging that you are ADHD and or autistic and breaking down that internalized ableism is going to help you agree that you have needs. Allow yourself to fulfill those needs, wants, preferences, and values, because you're not trying to deny that you have ADHD and or autism, and you're also being accepting of it, and you're also learning to accept the fact that sometimes that's disabling, and that it's okay for you to meet those needs in different ways than how other people meet their needs, which is my next tip, which would be to stop comparing yourself to other people, but especially stop comparing yourself to neurotypical people. That's literally like looking at what a cow needs and then being like, okay, I'm going to treat my cat exactly how I would treat a cow. Like, yeah, both cows and cats need to be fed and like need water and stuff, but what they need at like a core level is going to be different. My cat doesn't need a whole pasture, and I wouldn't put a cow in my house. As much as my brain would love to have a cow around for like 5 seconds until I went, wow, this is a lot of responsibility that I just don't have the spoons for. My next tip, which ties this all together, is start to get to know yourself. You're already doing that by acknowledging and validating that you have ADHD and or autism. You're starting to validate and acknowledge and fulfill your needs as you start breaking down that internalized ableism towards yourself. And as you start to do that, be more curious with yourself. Start asking yourself, why do I act this way? What do I need? And do so in a compassionate way. Stuff that helps with this is parts work, nervous system regulating, talking to yourself, journaling to yourself. And a good way to start getting to know yourself, if you don't even know where to start, is just look up like 50 questions to ask a first date. Ask yourself those questions and really write down the answers. I know it might seem silly to ask yourself, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite candy bar? And, oh, well, I already know that. But it's like, ask yourself, because then you start to trust yourself. You start to build that relationship with yourself. You start to feel valued because you're like, oh, you're actually listening to me. Like, you have an interest in me. Like, when's the last time that you felt interested in yourself? When did your core be like, oh, wow, like I feel validated. I feel like you're actually interested in me. That same desire and want that you want from other people, like, especially because you're neurodivergent, you have ADHD and or autism, like you want to be understood by other people. So start to understand and try to get curious about yourself, because as you start to build that relationship, you start to break down internalized ableism, you start to acknowledge and validate your ADHD and autism, and you even start to appreciate it. Which is possible, I promise. You start to feel safe with yourself. You start to feel like you can trust yourself. You start to get curious curious about yourself. You start to understand yourself better. And that's when you're going to be able to figure out your needs. You're going to figure out what's going to motivate you. You're going to figure out what your goals are authentically. That's how you give yourself permission to be authentic, because you don't have all those thoughts in your head that keep you from doing the things that you need to do for yourself because you're still masking alone, which is my next thing. If you do not break down that internalized ableism, you are still masking, but with yourself. You are still worried about what other people would think if they knew how you acted by yourself. But the next tip that I would give you is give yourself grace, because you're not going to be able to unmask 100% of the time, all of the time. I really just don't think that that's possible. And honestly, that's okay. You need to be able to protect yourself. You need to be able to have coping and protective mechanisms that help you to stay safe. And honestly, we can't always be working on ourselves, always being so self-aware that we are like not even being ourselves. We're just shutting ourselves down because we're like, am I masking? Am I doing this? Am I being inauthentic? Am I being authentic? Sometimes it just requires a little bit of going with the flow. And yes, I understand, especially if you have autism, that there's like all or nothing thinking, and you might be like, oh, well, I can't just think like that. Yes, we can start to break down or work with our all or nothing or rigid mindsets. Again, nervous system regulation, body somatics, and parts work really helps with this. You can't get rid of all of the things that make us ADHD and or autistic, but we can learn to work with them as well as appreciate them and kindly and compassionately be like, hey, sense of justice, hey, all or nothing thinking, I see you. I appreciate that you're trying to protect me, but I think you're just doing a little bit too much. So why don't we just reel that back in? And no, it's okay. It's okay that you did that. I'm happy you did that, but let's take a moment. You see the difference between doing that, being compassionate with yourself, and being like, oh gosh, I'm doing it again. I'm so stupid. Breaking down that internalized ableism and doing parts work and nervous system regulation and body somatics are really going to help you regularly check in on yourself, and not an analytical, I'm a project type of way like a best friend would. Just, hey buddy, like how are we feeling right now? Is there anything you need from me? Not like, oh, are you okay? Are we okay? No. Hey bud, how you doing? Hey baby, good morning. Like, how'd you sleep? How do you want the day to go? Prime yourself, prep yourself for the day. Well, I'm a little bit anxious, but we're going to try our best, especially in those moments before bed or right as you wake up. Don't reach for your phone or whatever like that. I know. I don't care if you do it throughout the day, but at least give yourself some time. Make that time for yourself, because again, let's bring it back to like if you had a friend or a partner and they just completely ignored you the moment that you woke up, you turned over and you're like, hey baby, good morning. And they were just like, yeah. That's what you're doing to yourself. Make sure to romanticize your relationship with yourself as well. Hey, darling, how did your day go? Well, it was a little bit stressful. Okay, is there anything that we can do? Is there anything that you want to work on for tomorrow so it's a little bit different? And I would also recommend regulating when you wake up and regulating before you go to bed, because not only is that going to help you get to sleep, but it's also going to help you in the morning just get yourself ready and prepped for the day so you're not so anxious. I'm not saying that it's going to be this foolproof thing that makes everything better. It's just really going to help. Remember, slow and steady. You're not going to be able to do this all overnight. And as you start to do these things, you start to get curious with yourself, break down the internalized ableism, you start to build a relationship with yourself, you start giving yourself permission to be authentic, you start getting curious, you start caring about yourself, being invested in yourself. You are going to start recognizing what your goals are, what's going to motivate you, and slowly but surely make realistic goals and realistic timelines, considering your needs, preferences, wants, and values, so that you can go after those things without being a perfectionist or making yourself into somebody that you're not. You're not neurotypical. You're not going to be able to go after these things the ways that a neurotypical person would. Figure out your limitations as well as your strengths, and then approach your life from that angle, and it's going to make a huge difference. Again, this is ever evolving. It's going to change over time, but as you continue to check in on yourself and keep that relationship with yourself, it's going to be a little bit easier to adjust and know when to adjust. Oh, and one more tip that's really important. Give yourself breaks. Rest can be extremely productive. Even if it's just 5 minutes of just laying on the bed, just staring at the wall, just give yourself breaks without any stimulation. Your brain will thank you. But anyway, please share this with anybody who might be able to benefit from this information, or share your tips and tricks that have helped you learn how to unmask in a way that's not overwhelming and scary, because it might help somebody else. Otherwise, my name is Sarah. I'm your favorite self-experimenting coach or companion, and I help get people reacquainted with who they most authentically are. You're an amazing person, and I hope you have the best day. Also, I think I look a little bit like No Face from Spirited Away. Yeah. Okay. Love you. Bye.